Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. Which of the following is are correctly matched? Lily Thomas case, issue of criminalization of politics, IR Coelho case, 9 scheduled items were open to judicial scrutiny, Kyoto Holohan case, disqualification of MPs and MLAs under anti-defection law. Which of the following is correctly matched? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article speaks about criminalization of politics. Now let us try and understand what are these case laws all about. When it comes to Lily Thomas case, yes, it is about criminalization of politics. What is this case law all about? We have one of the important laws in India called as Representation of the People's Act. According to this act, there is one of the section called as 8 of 4. What was this section all about? Let's say there is an MP or there is an MLA. He is committed one of the crime or an illegal act. So what does it do? It goes to the trial court. The trial court looks into this particular evidence and ultimately, let's say it convicts this particular person. But if this MLA or an MP approaches the higher judiciary within a span of 3 months, such a person will not be disqualified. He would be able to attend the proceedings of the parliament, will be able to attend the proceedings in the legislative assembly if he approaches the higher judiciary. That is when Lily Thomas files a case in the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court of India looks into this particular section and strikes down this particular section and says even if it is proved in the trial court that this particular person is convicted, he immediately will be disqualified as per this Lily Thomas case. So earlier, if he was convicted by the trial court, if he goes to the higher judiciary within 3 months, he could still be continuing as an MP or an MLA. But with this particular case, it was struck down. So the minute he is convicted in the trial court, he'll be disqualified as an MP or as an MLA. What is the IR Coelho case? We have the legislature who makes the laws. Let's say they do not want some of the laws to be having scrutinized by the judiciary. So what do? They put such laws in the 9th schedule. The minute they put such laws in the 9th schedule, this will shield away from the judicial scrutiny. The judiciary will not be able to look into such laws. But with IR Coelho case, what happens? Even if the legislature puts a particular law in the 9th schedule, such will be capable of judicial review. It can be looked into by the judiciary in case it violates the fundamental rights and it violates some of the constitutional principles. So earlier, before this particular judgment, if a law was placed in the 9th schedule, if it was violating some of the fundamental rights, there was fear that this could not be coming under the judicial scrutiny. But after this particular judgment, it has re-emphasized that if a law is violating the fundamental rights, constitutional principle, it can still be coming under judicial review and can be struck down by the constitutional courts in India. That is what is IR Coelho case. Then third, what we have is the Kyoto Holohan case. This is about disqualification of MPs and MLAs under anti-defection law. When it comes to MPs or MLAs under the anti-defection law, it is the presiding officer, the speaker, who would be able to say whether he is disqualified or not. Until this particular judgment, the final authority was the speaker, and it was said that the court had no role when it comes to this objectivity. But then the Supreme Court in Kyoto Holohan case said that the speaker would be acting as a tribunal. If it is acting as a tribunal, in such a case, the judgment passed with respect to disqualification will come under the judicial review, and ultimately the judiciary in India would be able to revisit this particular disqualification if it has malified intent, is the Kyoto Holohan case. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, which of the following statements are correct? It is based on the directive principles contained in Article 47 of the Indian Constitution. The central government can add or omit from the list of psychotropic substances and not the state government. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given in this article. Now, when we look into these statements, yes, the first statement is right. Why? Because it is Article 47 of the Indian Constitution, which speaks about preventing the abuse of drugs by the people in India. This concept or this DPSC is imported for drafting of this legislation. Now, when you look into the second statement, yes, it is right. The state governments do not have any power to add, remove, modify, or change when it comes to the psychotropic substances. It is only the central government which would be able to add, delete, modify, change the substances in that particular list. So if they have to remove a particular item from that list, it is only the central government. If they have to add a particular substance into that particular list, it is only the central government. So the state government does not have any powers when it comes to addition or deletion with respect to the substances under Narcotic Psychotropic Substances Act. We have one of the important bodies called as the Narcotics Control Bureau. It is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and this happens to be the apex drug law enforcement agencies which will coordinate all the action plans when it comes to drug law in the country. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which one of the following statements best describes the Atlantic Charter? It was a set of economic policy recommendations for developing countries supported by prominent economists and international organizations. It was a joint declaration issued during World War II by the United States and Great Britain that set out a vision for the post-war world. It is a treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union on the limitation of anti-ballistic missile systems. It was a set of guidelines which led to the establishment of an economic and political bloc comprising Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. Which of the statements best describes Atlantic Charter? The answer to this is it is a joint declaration during World War II made by United States of America and Great Britain. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference in this article. So this particular charter was signed under the leadership of British Prime Minister Winston Churchill as well as US President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the year 1941. What were the goals of this particular charter? It had three in nature. One is to make sure that there is free trade. Second is disarmament of the countries. And third is the right of self-determination of all the people after the end of the World War. So basically, this helps in restoration of the self-government where people would be able to choose the government after the Second World War. Then, in case there are any trade limitations, such will be immediately removed. There will be easing of the trade restrictions, and ultimately raw materials that is required for the economic prosperity will be given to all the countries after the World War. Then there are colonial powers as well. They might have had some of the territories which they might have captured during the World War II. Such territories captured by the colonial powers will be returned back to the home country so that they can decide what will be the future plans after World War II. That is what is called as the Atlantic Charter. Now we have the Biden administration and the Johnson administration who are coming up together to draft a new Atlantic Charter. Now if you go back to the question, there is the first statement. It says it was a set of economic policy recommendations for developing countries supported by prominent economists and international organizations. This is nothing but the Washington Consensus. So kindly remember, the Washington Consensus was one set of the guidelines that was given to the developing countries, especially the Latin American countries, so that they can enter the free market economics. And when it comes to the third one, yes, it is a treaty between United States of America and Soviet Union, but this is not about Atlantic Charter, but this happens to be anti-ballistic missile treaty. So this was a treaty that was signed between United States of America and the erstwhile Soviet Union. And when it comes to the fourth one, this happens to be speaking about Mercosur. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about CHIME. It is a network of radio antennas in the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, France, Sweden, Poland, Ireland and Italy, all connected by high-speed fiber optic cables. It is a superior instrument for observing the phenomenon of fast radio bursts. Which of the above statements is or correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference in this article. So what does CHIME stands for? It stands for Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment. This happens to be interferometric radio telescope at the Dominion Radio Astrophysical Observatory in British Columbia, Canada. So when we look into this particular statement, we can clearly say that the first statement given as option is wrong. Now when we look into the second statement, yes, it is right. So what are the objectives of this particular project? Basically, it was designed to chart the structure of the universe by mapping the hydrogen gas. Apart from this, this particular telescope will also discover dozens of fast radio bursts. So the question is, what is this fast radio burst? They are nothing but brief bursts of radio waves. They come from far away from the Milky Way galaxy, and this particular phenomena was discovered in the year 2007. And after that, there have been multiple other telescopes as well which have been able to discover these fast radio bursts. These are nothing but bright flashes of light. They come in a brief scenario. They come and give those flashlights, and they are distant parts of the universe. So their origins are still unknown. How exactly it works, it's still unknown, and the appearance is still highly unpredictable in nature, which is why this particular project is trying to understand what are these fast radio bursts. When we look into this particular project, it has 4 antennas as shown in this particular picture, which is 100 into 20 cylindrical parabolic reflectors. So what you see in this particular image are the reflectors with about 1224 dual polarization radio receivers that are suspended above them. So basically, this will help in identification of the fast radio burst. What is the significance of this particular project? There have been previous projects and telescopes as well which are able to understand and find out the fast radio burst, but the frequency with which this particular project is able to discover the FRBs is at an unprecedented rate. That happens to be the significance of this particular project. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, consider the following statements. It was established very recently in response to incidents of piracy and accidents of oil spills. It is an alliance meant for maritime security only. Which of the statements given above is correct? The answer to this is neither 1 nor 2. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2015. When you look into the first statement, it is wrong. Why? Because this particular cooperation initiative of Indian Ocean Rim countries was established in the year 1997 in Mauritius. So the first statement is wrong. When you look into the second statement, it is not only about maritime security, but this is also about sustainable development. This is also about economic cooperation. This agreement is also about technological cooperation. So bringing all the countries in and around the Indian Ocean, countries from 3 continents of Asia, Australia and Africa together, so that there is trade, socio-economic and cultural cooperation in the Indian Ocean Rim countries is the basic agenda of this particular cooperative initiative. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is discovered small field policy. What is this policy all about? When it comes to India's energy reserves, most of it is imported from multiple countries for India. And when it comes to India, what we also have some of the oil and the gas fields which are small in nature. So discovering them, identifying them, exploring them for the domestic consumption is the basic intention of discovered small field policy. So this particular policy wants to make sure that there is increased domestic production of oil and gas, and this came into existence in the year 2015 with the consultation of the ONGC and Oil India Corporation. So basically, this is one of the policies the government of India came up with to increase the domestic production of oil and gas. What are the guidelines as given under this particular policy? Up to 100% FDI participation by foreign companies and these companies can also enter into joint ventures with the Indian companies. Single license for the conventional and the unconventional hydrocarbon. What is this unconventional and the conventional hydrocarbon? When it comes to the conventional hydrocarbon, let's say there is one of the places, a oil and the gas field, where we would be able to extract the oil and the gas without much difficulties. So we do not require advanced tools and mechanisms. So what we require is the standard process to exploit and extract the oil in the conventional hydrocarbon region. But when it comes to the unconventional ones, this will require sophisticated machinery. There, what we require is a standard machinery, simple machinery. But when it comes to unconventional, what we require is sophisticated machinery. Why? Because there is poor permeability and porosity, and these are difficult reservoirs. So what they require is specialized techniques and tools for the exploration. So when it comes to this particular policy, there'll be one single license that would be given for exploring both the conventional as well as the unconventional hydrocarbons. This will also incentivize new investors. Technical capability is not kept as a pre-qualification criteria. Much prior to this, in case a company has to explore an oil or a gas field, they require and they have to prove the experience and expertise as well. But this is done away with, and the technical capability is not a criteria. No restriction on exploration during the contract period. Custom duties will not be inflicted if they are importing some of the goods and services for the petroleum operations. What do we mean by it? Let's say they have to explore a particular region, for which what they require is sophisticated tools and techniques. If they are importing such tools or goods from a different country, custom duties will not be imposed on such companies. Finally, there will be no oil cess that will be applicable on the crude oil production. So these are some of the guidelines as per the discovered small field policy. Why have we taken this topic? Because of the mention in this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.